The caw of a rooster is heard in the distance, its proud reverberations announcing the dawn of a new day. As heavy-laden eyes open with the light of a bright Sunday morning, turning his head from the glare of the window, his eyes focused on his own image. The shocking sights of seeing his face, reflected back, jolts him to full consciousness. For an instant he's frozen in terror, as the large, oversized, crystalline eyes of a doll stares from under the covers, its nose nearly touching his. Young Perkins instantly leaps from the bed, throwing the covers. He stands to his feet. The hideous thing forces him back against the shelves. The sudden motion causes several of the dolls to rain down about him, sending him into a fit of hysteria. Young Perkins begins screaming in horror. The widow instantly burst into the room. What's wrong? Her eyes wide. His demonstrations of horror cease with the widow's appearance. Unable to answer, the young man merely points to the figure in the bed. "Oh my, is that what all the fuss was about? I put that there last night to keep you company. She's my favorite. Her name is Betsy." The young man dropped his hand in relief, his legs weakened by the shock. He slowly slides down the shelves as other dolls accompany him down. Sitting cross-legged among the mound, he burst out into loud laughter, ashamed at so cowardly a display. The young widow places a hand up to her mouth in an attempt to disguise her amusement. Unable to contain herself, she joins the young man. The sight of him there among the dolls, merged with a look of his deep embarrassment, sends her into a fit of laughter. My, little man," she questions in between fits of laughter. "Little man, how are you going to protect me if you're afraid of my little dolls?" Young Perkins rises and begins to put the dolls back on the shelf. "Don't mind that," says the widow. "We've got to get you ready for church." "What about breakfast?" young Perkins asks, noticing the absence of the odor of food, whereon the widow cautions, "No breakfast today. After church, everybody's bringing a mess of food. The congregation's gonna have a picnic. I ironed your suit. It's laying across my bed. You don't have to worry about my little friends here." Smiling, she gazes down at the dolls. "You can dress in my room." The young man exits the bedroom. Passing through the hallway, he enters the widow's room, where he finds his black Sunday go-to-meeting suit, neatly pressed, laying just as the widow said, across her bed. His black patent leather shoes, newly dusted, waiting in the chair in the corner of the room. As young Perkins dresses, he can hear the widow's mirthful laughter continuing as she places each doll in its proper position. Young Perkins emerges from the widow's bedroom and is greeted with a peck on the cheek, followed by a pleasant smile. Taking a few steps back, she carefully examines the youth, turning him about, this way then that she voices her pleasure at his appearance. "That's my little man. That's the way a fella ought to look. Now you just stay nice and neat like that. Don't go making no mess now, just to sit in the living room while I dress." Young Perkins dutifully follows the widow's advice. He enters the living room. Seated comfortably in an easy chair, his eyes running the length of the wall, he coolly examines the photos of the widow's former husbands. His mind reflects back on the unnatural circumstances of their demise. Thinking to himself, he recalls overhearing the old Negroes speaking in hushed tones. They softly, quietly, affrightedly brought up the conjure woman, and how each and every man had somehow in one way or another been overshadowed by her presence. Now in Mississippi, how could a pack of ravenous wolves rip a man to shreds in broad daylight on an open country road, and there be no witnesses? He remembered the elders questioning the manner in which the second husband died, a man falling to his death being mangled by the wheels of a passing locomotive was no uncommon thing. Back then, many men rode the rails, as did the widow's second husband. His limbs didn't reveal any signs of the wheels of a locomotive. His mangled body bore the ungodly marks of something evil, something demonic, something inhuman. With an index finger placed to his temple, young Perkins re-examines the fate of the widow's third husband. The waters of the Musky River were, indeed, at times, extremely treacherous. It had taken the lives of countless victims, fishermen, swimmers, those that merely wished to launder their clothing. While on the surface it appeared calm, its bottom held branches, limbs of trees, and other bits of flotsam and jetsam. So having lost her husband in the muddy waters of the Musky River wasn't particularly an unnatural fate. But like his two predecessors, he had sadly found himself a victim of the dreadful shadow of the Conjure Woman. Whether or not her old walking stick was indeed the secret of her monstrous powers, young Perkins was determined to discover. After church services were over, after the baptismal ceremony, during the picnic, the young man would use all of his persuasive powers to convince his pal Kevin to accompany him through the fields, through the gloom of night, through the miry morass. A mad request indeed, to ask one's friend to brave the deadly perils of cottonmouths, copperheads, water moccasins, rattlers, and gators. It was more than urgent. It was a thing that had to be done. The Conjure Woman, like the hideous tree, had claimed too many lives. The sound of the bedroom door opens. The young widow emerges, finely dressed in a white cotton dress, short white cotton gloves, a pair of shoes, also white with little pink flowers. That, along with the wide-brimmed white hat with matching flowers trimmed along the rim, made her the very appearance of a Sunday afternoon. "How do I look?" she asked as she slowly turns, presenting herself for display. "You look just fine." The smile on the young man's face revealing the moment's mood. "Well, shall we go?" voices the widow as she extends an elbow. Young Perkins locks arms with the widow. The two walk arm in arm as they exit the home. The young widow cheerfully hums an old gospel hymn. It was a tune frequently sung by his grandmother. She often hummed it. Like the smiling light of dawn, it rose with the smell of breakfast. It softly echoed through the kitchen, wafting through the hall, filling the house, blissfully merging with the odor of ham and eggs. To hear his grandmother's voice was always a reassuring thing. It was as familiar to him as the scent, her lilac perfume, as soothing as her touch, her voice. The young widow continues humming gospel tunes as the two walk with arms linked down the long country road in the direction of the old wood-frame Baptist church. "Oh my, we're late," the widow exclaimed, with a bit of alarm. In the near distance, the sound of singing echoes from the wood-frame church. In the center of the roof rests a small steeple bell tower. The sound of a church bell rings out, announcing the beginning of service. Upon hearing the bell, the widow and young man increase their pace. They soon reach the double doors of the church that remain open, where the pastor is giving the morning announcements. All heads turn to the late comers, as the young widow briefly glances down in embarrassment. Taking young Perkins by the hand, the two enter. He sits in the row of seats on the left, where the children and the youth have their section, while the elders sit in the center row of seats. Young Perkins sits next to Kevin, who chastises the latecomer with a glare and a pinch. "Fool, you're late." "I know I'm late. I had to get dressed, didn't I? This ain't no ordinary day." I know," replies Perkins, who begins nervously looking around. "I see everybody's here today. Look, there's Miss Brown, Mr. and Mrs. Barker. I mean everyone. Look, there's your grandma." The young man's head turned in the direction of his grandmother, whose eyes reflect a sense of pride. Looking over her shoulder, she smiles back at the two, who return her gaze with a smile as pleasant as her own. "Are you nervous?" Kevin questions Perkins. "No, I'm not nervous," young Perkins nervously assures. Kevin, noticing the look of apprehension in the young man's face, asked again, "You sure?" "Well, maybe just a little." Whereupon Kevin delivers another punishing pinch to the young man's thigh. The preacher calls for the congregation to stand. He announces the title of the gospel hymn they are to sing. After a short prayer, the gospel hymn, "Pilot Me," begins to sound out. The refrains reaches to the rafters and pass through the wooden frame, the reverberations of which echo through the fields like the gentle breeze of summer. The sound carries for miles, rolling like distant thunder, like the breath of God, like the breeze from an angel's wing. It passes through the cotton fields, along the wheat fields, down the Musky River, all the way to the very edge of town, announcing to all that the First Missionary Baptist Church of Musky, Mississippi, was in session. Amid the baritones and basses, amid the altos and sopranos, young Perkins carefully eyes the crowd, searching for the presence of their new school teacher. There was the Iceman, Old Man Grimes. Next to him, seated at his usual seat, was the poor broken soul of Jubal, the shoe black. All the elders were present, both men and women. The absence of Uncle Silas was natural. The fetid, debauched soul of Uncle Silas was devoid of God consciousness. But where? Where was Mr. Pickman? Surely he had to be present. Pastor Jackson had to announce him. After all, he was to be our new school teacher. This was Sunday afternoon. Mr. Pickman had to know that class was to begin the very next day. Young Perkins begins to get suspicious, remembering the violent reaction of old Shotgun at his approach, and the feel of the stranger's flesh beneath his gloved hand. His eyes, the thing that lurked behind those cool blue-gray eyes of his, hid a darkness, a deep, deceptive malevolence that his smiling cordiality couldn't fully conceal. Young Perkins chastises himself for his suspicions. Mulling it over in his mind, he gives Mr. Pickman the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was at the schoolhouse getting everything ready for tomorrow. Yeah, that was it. Or maybe Mr. Pickman would come in late. Being from up north, he might have been a Catholic or something. Whatever the case, Monday would answer all questions. The young man, deep in his heart, had half hoped he had been frightened away by the town's toughs. Or if the young man was really lucky, the stranger had, perhaps, may have had a misstep and fallen into the Musky River, there to find a watery grave. For young Perkins, tomorrow would take care of itself. While today was his baptism. That is, he and Kevin's. Kevin's sisters had all been baptized. They, along with their mother and the widow Hazel, had been, so to speak, dunked in the soul-cleansing waters of the muddy, Musky River. As the congregation continues in songs of praise, his eyes fall on that of Bessie May, her face reflecting a certain grace, a hopeful joy ringing out sincere praises of gratitude for her son's safety. Young Perkins grinds his teeth. His face forms an ugly grimace to see her grateful spirit so cruelly deceived. The hymns of praise at an end. The congregation sits to listen to the pastor's oratory. Today's sermon concerns itself with that of the prophet, John the Baptist, and the importance of having one's body fully immersed in water in order for an individual to be pronounced properly baptized. The remainder of the pastor's sermon falls on hollow ears. Young Perkins disregards all of the pastor's words. He merely continues to stare at the empty seat where Jonah would sit on the occasions when Silas would allow him to accompany Bessie May to church. If it hadn't been for Silas, Jonah would be there with them in church. He would be safe. This would be his baptism as well. Kevin notices the grimace on young Perkins' face. "Fool, what's wrong with you?" Emphasizing the question with yet another pinch. "Ouch. Hey, quit it." Young Perkins rubbing the painful spot. "Why you looking like that?" inquires Kevin. "Like what?" Perkins demands. Kevin's face forms a questioning frown. Like, I know, like something's wrong, like you're mad at something. Somebody messing with you? Kevin voices his friendly concern. "I know." Looking over his shoulders, seated in the back of the children's section, a lanky, dark-complected teenager glares at the two. "It's that bully, ain't it?" Kevin's eyes narrow as he glares back at the boy. "You don't have to say nothing. It's that bully, Willie Powell. He thinks he's so much, just because he turned 16 last year. I sure wish this was his baptism day. I'd hold his head under so long he'd come up fish gills." The thought of a gilled Willie Powell dangling on the end of a fishing line changed the young man's dark mood into one of mirth, sending the two into a fit of quiet snickering. The closing of the Bible announces the end of the pastor's sermon and the end of the day's service. The pastor then announces the two young men present are to be baptized. The congregation gives out declarations of praise the Lord and hearty hallelujahs. The pastor bid the young men entry into the cloakroom where they don their baptismal gown. The gown is nothing more than a white linen sheet with an opening for the head. Around their waists is tied a thin cord. Beneath they wear nothing but their underwear. Kevin and young Perkins stare at each other in embarrassment. Their comical attire causes them both to emit little chuckles. The two remain in the confines of the closet, listening as the congregation exits the church, and walking down the field, they can hear them singing at the edge of the river. The echoing chorus of "Wade in the Water" is sung slowly, softly, the elders of the church singing in a manner that woefully, mournfully, reflects the moment's solemnity, like that of a funeral dirge. In speaking in spiritual terms, it is in fact a dirge. The young men are to be immersed in the water as a soul that has passed is immersed in the soil, the grave, and in rising they are reborn, resurrected like Christ, and filled with the protection of the Holy Spirit, of Christ's blood. Their names would be written in the book of life, there to dwell in heaven forever. The pastor opens the closet door and guides the two from the church and across the field. The entire congregation line the bank of the river. As the two approach its edge, Kevin gives a little giggle of embarrassment, but is sharply chastised by the pastor, who voices the serious importance of the ceremony. At the water's edge, the pastor removes his socks and shoes. Rolling his pants above the knee, he turns the two about. They face the congregation, who remains softly singing. Young Perkins begins to choke up. His eyes start to tear as he notices his grandmother's smiling face. The expression she wore. Lord, her eyes streaming with tears of heavenly joy. The pastor begins to speak. "These two boys here is about to be baptized. Their names is going to be written up there, in the book of life. Today, they're going to be washed in the blood, cleansed of all their sins. Yes, Lord Jesus." As the pastor continued to speak, he takes several steps back until the waters reaches above his knees. Kevin and young Perkins glance at each other with a kind of nervous anxiety, whereupon the pastor places both hands on Kevin first. "I baptize you in the name of the Father." He then leans Kevin back until his body is completely submerged beneath the waters of the muddy, musky river. To him what surely seems an eternity, he re-emerges coughing up water, barely able to catch his breath. The pastor once more declares, I baptize you now, in the name of the sun." Once more, Kevin finds himself beneath Musky's muddy waters. Strangely, as the pastor is absorbed in the pastoral performance, unnoticed by all is the odd behavior of the river's water. The water had somewhat risen. With the third and final immersion, Kevin is declared saved and is ordered back into the church's dressing room. Coughing and sputtering, he gladly obliged. The crowd's loud adulations of approval accompany him. The pastor then places both hands on the shoulders of young Perkins. After the familiar pronouncements, he leaned young Perkins back until he, like Kevin, disappears beneath the waters of the Musky. Upon rising, the familiar sound of joyful voices ring out. "I baptize you in the name of the sun," says the pastor, who remains unaware of the fact that the current had begun to increase its flow. It's as if the dam, miles away, had suddenly broken, sending its level rising by several feet. By the final immersion, the swiftly flowing waters of the Musky River are up to the pastor's waist and rising. "This is the last one," declares Pastor Jackson as he notices the danger. Young Perkins' eyes urge the pastor to haste. With a nod of his head, Pastor Jackson declares, "I baptize you." But before the pastor is able to finish his sentence, as he carefully leaned young Perkins back, a pair of cadaverous hands suddenly emerge from the muddy waters, the arms of which have found themselves wrapped around the young man's torso, carrying him down. Young Perkins is taken with the current. The sudden horror builds to terror, the terror building to stark, shocking madness. Rolling into darkness, wrestling amid the airless black, he is wrapped by what to him feels like the long coils of a snake, binding him tightly to his opponent. Young Perkins' desperate battle continues as he frantically struggles to breach the surface of the deadly waters. There he finds himself trapped within the mire of a raw, hysterical fear. Clawing for air and gurgling, he feels his body torn and ripped by jagged dagger-like branches of trees that had long been submerged. If hell had a single voice, it would be found in the water-soaked lungs of young Perkins. As young Perkins' hands continue their wild gesticulations, the drastic motions carry him briefly to the surface, only to be greeted by the hollow sockets of sightless eyes. For what stared back at him was beyond the grotesque. Far, far surpassing the hideous was none other than the swollen, blue-black, mutilated corpse of that of his cousin Jonah. The hangman's noose still connected to his neck. Locking him in the embrace of necrotic arms, the bleak specter of rotted death coldly wrapped its cloak-like shroud around young Perkins, tightly squeezing the life from his body, holding him as tight as the grip of the grave. All was black, submerged deep within the darkness of the pit of hell. Shrill screams echo amid tormented cries of scorching anguish, the sounds of which calls young Perkins to consciousness. A cacophony of confusion, voices of elders, merge with the howls of those who find themselves witness to the horrific sight. Unable to see, his eyes caked with mud, young Perkins is accosted by the feel of a multitude of hands that frantically worked to free him. With the dissipation of the gloom comes the nightmarish realization that he is yet tethered to Jonah's hideous frame. Someone's rake-like shrieks filled the air. The voice is that of Bessie May, who repeatedly emits banshee cries of Jonah, 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 Jonah. She continues to call the name, Jonah, Jonah. The rapidity of her sharp declarations sends the young man into a series of spasmodic fits. His teeth bite down against his tongue, causing blood to spurt. From his bleary eyes he realizes that he is face to face, mouth to mouth, with the horrid semblance of his cousin's bloated remains. In a daze, he attempts to turn his head. In doing so, young Perkins' open mouth grinds hard against the putrid, disgusting semblance of Jonas worm-impacted teeth. With the release of the rope, the young man is free from the bonds that tethered him. With a gurgling gasp, young Perkins struggles to fill his lungs with life-giving air. Hovering between two worlds, he feels the pastor lift him in his arms and carry him from the scene. All the while, the cries of the crowd echo into the distance, rising far above the din, above the shrieks and moans. Above all is heard the voice of Bessie May, who continues screaming her son's name, Jonah, Jonah, her declarations of agony reaching to the very heavens. Surely the demons lurking in the pit of hell rejoiced to hear her cries.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into a really intense story, all set on one single, humid southern Sunday.
That's right. It's a day that starts with preparations for a sacred ritual, a baptism.
But it ends up dredging up something truly dark from the community's hidden life.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack that tension. You've got this surface layer of, ordinary Sunday ritual, spiritual cleansing. But underneath, there's this thick current of violence, superstition, deep paranoia. It's quite a mix.
And it hits us right from the start with the main character, young Perkins. His Sunday morning begins with, well, not exactly peace and quiet.
No, not at all. It's jarring. He wakes up, and the first thing he sees, it's pure nightmare fuel.
Yeah, tell us about that. It's a doll, right?
A big doll, yeah. Betsy, with these creepy crystalline eyes just staring at him from under the bed covers.
Oh, man. Placed there by the widow he's staying with, apparently for company.
Right, and Perkins just, reacts with total hysteria, leaps out of bed, terrified.
Understandable.
But what's really interesting is how fast it flips. The widow rushes in, sees what's happened.
And instead of comforting him, or maybe apologizing,
it turns into laughter. Shared loud laughter. It's this really weird moment of, bonding over terror.
Almost feels manipulative, doesn't it? Because she immediately follows it up by kind of undermining him.
Exactly. She says something like, "Little man, how are you going to protect me if you're afraid of my little dolls?"
Yeah, planting that seed of doubt right away. It adds this layer to her character, this sort of playful edge that might hide something else.
Definitely. And the day's logistics are kind of odd, too. No breakfast.
Right, because there's a big congregation picnic planned for after the baptism.
So Perkins has to get dressed in the widow's room, stay nice and neat, black Sunday suit, patent leather shoes, the whole deal.
And the widow herself. And she finally comes out.
She's the picture of Sunday perfection. White cotton dress, short white gloves, this wide-brimmed hat with pink flowers, like she stepped out of a painting.
The appearance of a Sunday afternoon, the text says. It's such a strong visual contrast to the undercurrents we're already feeling.
Absolutely, because while she's getting ready, Perkins isn't just waiting patiently. He's in the living room.
Staring at the pictures.
Yeah, the pictures of her former husbands. And his mind is just racing with fear and suspicion.
Okay, let's get into that. This is where the paranoia really takes hold, isn't it? What happened to these husbands?
Well, the narrative gives us these really lurid details. The first one, supposedly killed by ravenous wolves.
In broad daylight, on an open road.
Yeah, with no witnesses.
Yeah.
Highly unnatural, right. Then the second husband.
He supposedly fell from a locomotive, which, I guess, could happen if you're riding the rails.
It could, but the text makes a point of saying his body had these ungodly marks, something evil, demonic, not marks from a train accident.
Okay, creepy. And the third?
Drowned in the Musky River. Now, that river is known to be treacherous, so maybe that one sounds more natural. But even that death gets linked back to the same thing people whispered about for the others. The dreadful shadow of the conjure woman.
So it doesn't matter how they died, wolves. Train, drowning the local explanation, or at least the one Perkins is clinging to, is supernatural malice.
Precisely. And that's crucial. Perkins isn't thinking about, maybe the widow had something to do with it, or maybe they were just tragic accidents. He's laser focused on proving the conjure woman is real and powerful.
He wants to find her old walking stick,
Right.
believing it's the source of her monstrous powers. He needs tangible proof of supernatural evil.
Yeah, he's obsessed. And this obsession leads him to cook up this plan, this mad request, the text calls it.
What's the plan?
He wants to convince his friend Kevin after the picnic, mind you, to sneak off with him.
Sneak off where?
Through the fields, braving all sorts of dangers, cottonmouths, copperheads, water moccasins, rattlers, even gators, to confront the conjure woman, to find that walking stick. It shows how desperate he is, how deep this specific fear runs. He's willing to risk actual physical danger to deal with this perceived supernatural threat.
But first, the baptism. They had to get through the church service.
Right. And they show up late, the steeple bell's already ringing, everyone turns to look as they walk in. A bit embarrassing.
Perkins sits with the youth, next to Kevin. How does Kevin react?
Not happy. Gives him a glare and a painful pinch for being late. Typical kid stuff, even in church.
So even amidst all this heavy atmosphere, there are these little moments of normalcy.
Yeah, but Perkins is clearly nervous, not just about being late, but about the baptism itself, and he starts scanning the room.
Looking for someone specific.
Mr. Pickman, the new school teacher. Class starts the next day, but Pickman's not there.
And this absence really bothers Perkins. Why?
Because Perkins already deeply distrusts him. He remembers seeing Pickman interact with someone called Old Shotgun, who had a violent reaction to him. And Perkins notes this feeling of deep, deceptive malevolence hiding behind Pickman's smile and friendly manner. He just gets a bad vibe from the guy.
A really bad vibe, actually.
Yeah.
Because the text tells us his internal thoughts.
Oh, yeah. This is where Perkins himself seems pretty dark. He's so suspicious of Pickman, he actually finds himself hoping the teacher had
a misstep and fallen into the musky river. Wish him dead, basically.
Yeah, he wishes a watery grave on him. It's quite chilling. He's terrified of potential external evil like the conjure woman, but he's got this violent impulse inside him towards someone he sees as an outsider.
And that internal darkness sits right alongside real present grief. The pastor's giving a sermon about John the Baptist, about immersion.
Standard baptism stuff.
But Perkins isn't really listening. He's staring at an empty seat nearby.
The seat belonging to his cousin, Jonah.
Right. And he's thinking about how someone named Silas is responsible for Jonah not being there, not being safe in church. So the danger isn't just theoretical or supernatural for Perkins. It's real, it's personal, it's cost his family.
Yeah, that adds another layer of tension. And then there's one last little moment before things get serious.
The bully.
Willie Powell, yeah. He's there. And Kevin, Perkins' friend, has this quick, violent, but kind of funny daydream about dealing with him during the baptism.
What's the daydream?
Holding Willie underwater for so long, he'd come up fish gills.
Grim humor, but wow, talk about foreshadowing drowning given what's about to happen.
Exactly. It's the last bit of dark humor before the ritual itself begins in earnest.
So the Bible closes. Perkins and Kevin go to get ready.
Yep, into the cloakroom. They put on their baptismal gowns, just a white linen sheet tied at the waist with a cord over their underwear.
Must have felt pretty awkward.
The text says they were mutually embarrassed, shared a few chuckles, trying to lighten the mood before this solemn moment.
Then the procession to the river starts.
And the mood shifts completely. The whole congregation walks towards the water, and they're singing "Wade in the Water."
How are they singing it?
Slowly, softly, like a funeral dirge, the text emphasizes. It really leans into that symbolism of immersion as a kind of death and resurrection. Very solemn.
Kevin goes first.
Right. Pastor immerses him, presumably 3 times for the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, though the text doesn't detail that part explicitly. Kevin comes up coughing, sputtering, gets through it. He's officially baptized.
But the narrative slips in a crucial detail right here, doesn't it? Something almost unnoticeable.
It does. It notes the water level had somewhat risen while Kevin was being baptized. The river's changing, but nobody's really paying attention yet.
Until Perkins steps in.
Then it becomes impossible to ignore. As the pastor starts Perkins' immersion, the current just picks up speed dramatically.
How dramatically?
Like a distant dam had suddenly broken. The water rises fast, several feet. Suddenly it's up to the pastor's waist.
That sounds dangerous.
Very. The pastor realizes it, tries to hurry things along. He starts the final immersion, says the words, "I baptize you."
And then it happens. before he can even finish the sentence.
Yeah. This is the climax. Suddenly, these hands shoot out of the water.
Whose hand?
Cadaverous hands, the text calls them. They grab Perkins around the torso and just yank him down hard into that churning, muddy current.
Oh my God. He's being pulled under?
Violently. He's struggling, getting scraped and torn by submerged tree branches hidden in the dark water. It's chaotic and terrifying.
Does he see what grabbed him?
He fights his way back towards the surface for a moment, gasping for air, and that's when he sees it. It's not the conjure woman, not some demon.
What is it?
It's a face with hollow sockets of sightless eyes. It's the corpse of his cousin, Jonah.
No. The cousin from the empty seat.
The very same. Water-bloated, blue-black, mutilated, just this horrific dead thing locking him in an embrace.
Wow. Was he just floating there?
Worse. The text makes a point of saying the hangman's noose is still connected to Jonah's neck.
So he was murdered, hanged, and dumped in the river.
Exactly. And the rising river, the very instrument meant for Perkins' spiritual cleansing, has literally brought the evidence of that murder, Jonah's body, right into the middle of the sacred ritual.
That is incredibly grim. Perkins is trapped with the corpse.
Yeah, locked in this necrotic embrace, his mouth grinding against Jonah's putrid, disgusting semblance of worm-impacted teeth. Just absolute horror.
And the crowd. What's happening on the riverbank?
Pandemonium. But above the noise, you hear these piercing screams. Bessie May, who must be Jonah's mother.
Screaming his name.
Jonah! Jonah! Like a banshee cry, the text says. It's just chaos until the pastor finally manages to wrestle Perkins free from the corpse and carry him out of the water.
Wow. What an ending to a baptism. The ritual promised spiritual rebirth.
And instead, the river delivered cold, hard, physical proof of death and violence. That's the shocking contrast, isn't it? The whole ceremony gets brutally interrupted by the town's buried secret, literally surfacing.
So that aha moment we look for, it's really about Perkins' fear, isn't it? He was so consumed by the idea of supernatural evil, the conjure woman, the demonic marks.
Right. He wanted to fight ghosts and magic walking sticks.
But the real horror wasn't supernatural at all. It was human violence. A murder, a boy hanged and hidden.
Exactly. The river didn't reveal a demon. It revealed a victim and undeniable evidence of a crime. The fear of the unknown gives way instantly to the horror of the known, the tangible.
The community came expecting salvation, a cleansing ritual.
And instead, the river basically served them a judgment. It spat out a truth they couldn't ignore anymore.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a final thought to chew on. We saw the river expose the truth about Jonah.
This supposedly cleansing, life-giving river became a current carrying death and judgment.
So if the musky river could hold on to Jonah's body and then reveal it so dramatically, what else might it be holding? What about those other unnatural circumstances surrounding the widow's first two husbands? The wolves, the train accident marks.
Could the river, or the land around it, hold the truths behind those deaths too? Maybe the focus on the conjure woman was just a distraction from secrets much closer to home.
Something to think about. That's all for this deep dive. Join us next time.